Hey everybody, here we are for part 3 of the Robotic Sphere tutorial series. We're going to finish it out inside of Redshift, learning how to texture and light. I did not initially intend to use Redshift for this, but I just got it myself. I'm learning about it, so I figured, you know what, let's learn it a little bit together and finish out the series with it. So let's get on in there and get some stuff done. Alright, we are back for part 3 of our 3-part series. In this video, we're going to take a quick look at setting up a camera move on our Robotic Sphere, and then we're going to move into texturing and lighting. So I'm going to jump up and add a circle spline. Here I'm going to change its orientation. Then I'm going to go ahead and widen its radius. And once we've done that, let's go ahead and rename this. We're going to call it our camera track. All right, and once we've done that, we're also going to come up here and add a new null, and we're going to call this target, and we're going to come to a different view here, and we're just going to center him up. Doesn't have to be perfect, but we're going to center him up as best as we can to our robotic sphere. So once we're happy with that, let's go ahead and add our first motion camera. And I'm going to use motion camera because aside from giving us some handheld properties, it's also going to allow us some other flexibilities that I like. So under animation path spline, we're going to go ahead and put our camera track in there. Let's go ahead and look through our camera. And so what it's done is it's jumped us to the front of the spline here. You can see our little handheld simulated guy. The camera's on his shoulder, and he's been placed at the front of the spline here. So I'm actually going to rotate our spline, and we're going to bring him back to the front here. We'll just do a -90. You can see that our target has been added into our camera already for us, so that's good. Using our parallax parameters here, we're going to go ahead and try to align our first shot, and you can see what's happening here on the side. Our little guy is moving. Let's see, we want our camera to be almost eye level here to the center, so we're just going to mess with that a little bit. And I just want to set up our very first move here, so maybe we're right about here. So let's come in here. We're going to start a little bit off center here. So we'll start at 3 here. All right, so we'll then jump back to frame 0. We're going to go ahead and set our first keyframe. And then let's take it to about almost 2 seconds here. And we'll go maybe, let's see what 5 looks like. And we're going to change that F curve. If I right click there and come down to show F curve, let's drag our timeline in here. Right now it's got to ease in and ease out. We just want it to be constant. We also want to go under function here, track after, meaning what should it do after this keyframe here. We're just going to make it continue so that it just keeps moving. All right, so if I play this, you're going to see our handheld here is going to go a little crazy. We don't want that. But the other thing you're going to see is that even after that 50 keyframe, our camera move just continues on. But let's go ahead and adjust that handheld motion. So if we come under motion here, camera rotation, camera position, this is where our move is coming. This is where all that jittering is happening. Rotation, we want almost nothing. So we'll come to a 10 there, and then maybe 20 on the position movement. So let's see what that looks like. So it's very subtle, a very subtle handheld movement, which is kind of nice. We don't want it to stand out too much. So we will call this Cam 1. All right, that's camera 1. Yeah, we'll leave our target and our camera track outside of that. So let's go ahead and add a second motion camera. We'll call it Cam 2. It gave us a spline and a target already as a default, but we don't want to use those. So we're going to replace those. Under animation, we're going to grab our camera track, and then for the target, we're going to use our target. we can get rid of these. All right, let's look through our second camera here. So we're going to adjust him as well. So we want a little bit of a lower angle. Our second shot is going to pick up at 51. I'm going to go ahead and add a keyframe here. I'm also going to go ahead and adjust our motion back to what our other camera was, which I believe was 10 and 20. On our spline, our move, we're going to take it from 51. Let's go to 100 here, and we'll just bring him a little bit to the front. You know what? I'm actually going to start further down. Let's start at 12 on this shot. Still going to go to 100, but we're going to bring him forward like that. All right. So let's go ahead, right click again under animation, show F curve. Drag this guy back in our window here. We're going to do the same thing here. We're going to give it a linear move, and then for our function track after, we're going to also continue. That way these shots just continue on. So let's see what that's looking like. Okay, see, and it just continues on. All right, so now that we have those two camera moves set up, let's start sliding around our action keyframes for our robotic sphere to open up. So we set those in the last video, but we're going to adjust those here to match what our camera is doing. So I really just want to take all of our keyframes here for our robotic sphere, and I'm going to slide them down to about the 90 mark. In fact, let's even take him down to the 100 frame. At 90 here, we're going to start to set some other keyframes with our master null here that's going to control our entire character, our entire robotic sphere. So at 90 here, I'm going to set our first keyframe on rotation B. Okay, and then I'm going to bring him back to about 12 frames earlier, 78. I'm going to turn him to 180. So then 8 frames before that, at 70, I'm going to set a keyframe on our rotation P. And again, another 12 frames before that, we are also going to turn him 180 degrees. So essentially what that has done is it's causing the secondary animation where he's going to flip, pause, flip again, and then open up. Knowing that, let's go to our animation driver, and we're also going to adjust just a couple of these keyframes. So I like where he opens up, he slides open, gun comes out, but I don't want him to fire so quickly. So we are going to adjust where this happens. Let's bring him to 150, and we're going to take these keyframes and we're going to bring them down to there. But right here at 132, we're going to go ahead and add that fully open position. And we'll add a keyframe there. So now he'll open up, he'll pause, fire. We're going to make our full animation here about 7 seconds long. So before we move into texturing and lighting, let's go ahead and set our stage here. So let's come in here. We're just going to close this up. Let's move our camera to down here. Let's get our cameras ready. There they are. Selecting our stage, frame 0. Let's move our first camera, set our keyframe. We'll come over to frame 51 and we will drag our second camera in. Right there. We'll go ahead and set that. So if we come back to 0, hit play, camera 1, camera 2. All right, 7-second shot. Nice and easy. All right, guys, for this next part of the tutorial here, I'm actually going to make a change, and you're going to see that my layout is a little bit different. I was originally going to just create some simple materials, textures inside of Cinema's basic material editor, but over the weekend I started testing Redshift, and immediately loved what you could do, and I was loving the results I was getting. So I figured, you know what? Let's finish this video by texturing our robotic sphere using Redshift. So by all means, this is not going to be a tutorial on Redshift, as I am not qualified to teach Redshift at this point. I'm just getting into it myself. So we're going to be learning this a little bit together today, because I'm just going to be doing basic material stuff in Redshift. A huge shout out to Chad Ashley over at Grayscale Gorilla, because it's his tutorial that I watched to kind of get familiar with Redshift, and he shared some pretty cool techniques. So I'm going to touch on a basic version of the technique that I learned from him, and we're going to go ahead and finish this video out by texturing our robotic character here. So let's jump right in and do that. So the first thing you're going to notice with my layout is I've got the Redshift nodes kind of set up over here alongside the Redshift render view, which is currently not active. I'm going to make it active in a minute, but first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to get rid of our old camera and lights that we had in here, and under our layers I'm going to turn off the stand-in environment that I had going on for reflections. We don't need that. The first thing we're going to do is we're going to make our render view active in Redshift by hitting the little play icon here. That's going to switch it on. So there it is, it's on, it's looking at stuff, but you're going to see nothing shows up, and that's because I got rid of the lights we had. So with Redshift, we're going to jump right to the light here. They have different kinds of lights that you can play with, and the one that I am a little familiar with right now is the dome light, which is kind of an overall scene light. So we're going to start there, and immediately you're going to see our render view come to life here with our robotic sphere. Under our dome light, we can put a dome map to help with reflections and environment. So we're going to go ahead and load one up real quick. I have this basic HDR kitchen probe image, so I'm going to bring that in, but I don't want it to be our environment. Enable background, I'm going to turn that off. Let's now create a basic material. So Redshift material node right here, and I'm going to throw it right on top of our robotic sphere. Right here you'll see it comes to life with reflections, a little bit of glossiness, and it's starting to look pretty. But let's go in there and change some things. First thing I'm going to do is come back up to the dome light here, and I'm going to change the exposure. We're going to go down a bit. And so that's looking kind of nice. Okay, we've got that going. Let's jump into our edit shader graph, and I'll pull it into our record window here so you can see it. So it is node-based, which takes some getting used to if you've never used a node-based editor before. Basically, we have our base material here, and it's going into our output, which is feeding the render view here. With that said, our first layer here, if we go under our basic, we're going to rename this to our base metal. Okay, and under base properties, we're going to go ahead and use one of the Redshift presets. We're going to go to iron, which you're going to see that immediately update down here. If we come down to reflections, you have your weight of reflection, which is basically how reflective your material is. So if this was 0, it wouldn't be reflective at all, which then it goes dark again, because it's not reflecting the environment at all. So, and since we don't have any other lights except that image map, it goes dark. So we're going to bring that back. Roughness is basically how blurry our reflections are. So if we were to zero that out, it would be a perfect chrome ball, which we don't really want either for this. So we will go back to what it was set at. And actually, if I change the reflection color, since that's mostly what's being seen here, the environment that's reflecting, I'm going to bring that down in color. And so you'll see it update here to like a darker iron metal. Let's start there. You know, as we start adding layers of things on top, we can always go back and start making changes without messing with the rest of your setup. We're going to go ahead and control drag that same node here, and I'm going to go ahead and plug it into the output. So now we're now seeing this material here, which currently is exactly the same as our metal base, but we're going to change that. We're going to call this one our paint, and we're going to go under base properties here, and instead of iron, we're going to go to a plastic, and it's still pretty reflective, so we're going to take that down. We don't want it to be as reflective, and we're going to roughen it up. It's a bit more blurry. Can look like paint. Maybe it's still a little too reflective, so let's go to 0.2. All right, let's say we want to start there. We're going to change our paint color just to have a little bit of subtle color in there. Okay, so let's say that's our base color. So we want to reveal that, right? We want to see some of that metal coming through, like this paint is weathered and old and faded. So the way we're going to do that is essentially, since we have two layers of color, we want to build basically a mat that we can feed the paint through that's going to have holes in it that will reveal or let some of the metal come through visually. And to do that, we're going to need a few things. So let's grab some nodes here. We're going to need a material blender. So I'm going to pull that out here. I'm going to move these back a little bit to give us some room as we start adding different nodes. We're also going to need a noise. So we'll pull that right down here. We're going to need a composite. We're also going to need a ramp. And we're going to need a change range. Okay, so we're going to do all these things, just get them out here. And then we'll be adding a couple more things as we build. But let's start here. So for our material blender, we're going to take our metal and plug it into our base color. We're going to take our paint, plug it into layer 1 color. Let's plug this guy in. Okay, so right now we're only seeing the iron because it's the base layer and we don't have anything showing our paint, which is where the noise comes in. This is going to be our mat. So let's start working on this. I'm going to plug our noise into our output here just so we can see what we're doing. So let's start working on this. Complexity, I'm going to bring up a bit. Maybe we'll go even a bit more. Coordinates, let's change these scales to something that works a little better. We'll do that. Our color, we're going to clamp the black, clamp the white a little bit more. Okay, let's start there on this guy. I'm going to control drag our noise to make another one. And now we're going to plug this into our output, and we're going to start working on this guy. We're going to change him up just a little bit. We're going to offset these values just a little bit. Something like that. Let's clamp these down. Okay. Plug this into our output, and we'll change the blend mode to screen. So now we're seeing both of them. Seeing that, let's come back and pull this guy back a little bit. And I'm also going to change this guy up. Something a little more streaky like that. I think this is a little too stretched maybe. We'll try that and see what that does for us. Okay, so now we're going into our change range, which is essentially going to let us give a range to our whites and blacks, or darks and lights. I'm going to plug the output into our result here. From there, we are going to need another node here. We're going to need a curvature. So we'll take the output of our change range and we're going to plug it into the radius here. Let's move these back a little bit. If we plug our curvature into our output, we can see essentially going to find our roundings and our curved edges. So if we have that now, we're going to plug this into the ramp input, and we're going to change this from auto to alt. This ramp is going to allow us, if I invert them here, it's going to allow us to crush our edges just to get the little bit that we want, because we don't want it to bleed through too much. We just want a little bit of a weathered look. Let's say we like that. We're going to plug this into our layer 1 blend color, which is essentially going to be the matte for our paint. So if we look at the output now, you can already see what we're going for here. So we have our paint coating, but we can see that it's chipped and weathered and letting that metal bleed through on the edges and the curves. Okay, so we've got that. So now I'm going to back up a little bit here. A couple more things that we're going to add to this material.
So let's take a look at that. We're going to need a texture node, a triplanar, and then we're also going to need another ramp. We're going to need another composite. Okay, so texture, we're going to go in here, we're going to load a grunge texture image right here. All right, and we are going to go ahead and essentially, let's plug in our triplanar to our output. We're going to go to the texture coordinate X, then we're going to go to texture coordinate Y, and finally to the Z. So essentially what the triplanar has done, it's allowed us to take that 2D grunge texture and map it to all three axes on our robotic sphere. All right, so now we've got that, and we essentially want to take this grunge texture and we want to blend it with our other one. All right, let's control that intensity with our ramp. Okay, and then we're going to look at the output of that. And we're going to come here, we're going to invert these knots, and we're just going to crush it like that. Not too much, just a little bit. All right, let's go ahead and composite these two together. We're going to take our first ramp, put it into the base, take our new ramp, put it into the blend. We're going to use a multiply. Let's take a look at that output. Okay, so now you can see what we've got here. We've got our original bleed with the edges and the roundings, and then we've got just these random paint chip areas. So let's see what that is going to give us. So I'm going to take the output of this composite, put it into our blend here to be the new matte for our paint, and let's look at the new result. All right, and there it is. Okay, so now we still have our edges that are worn and weathered, but now we've also got chipped paint throughout on the actual main panels or main faces of our character. But it's probably a little too much actually, so that's where the ramp comes in. And we can pull these back so we can just let a little bit come through. And it really doesn't have to be much at all. So it could be something like that, which I think is looking better. All right, so now we've got that. And I think there's just one more thing I want to add, which is going to be a little bit of grunge and dirt that kind of builds up in these seams or deep areas of our model. So we're going to jump right back over here, and instead of redoing all of these steps here, we're just going to grab all of this and we're going to control drag it down here. So we basically just copied all that, but we're going to change up these noises just a little bit. And we're going to do that just with the offset. So we'll just give it some random numbers. All right, we'll do the same thing here, just so they don't all look the same. And let's try these numbers. All right, so we've got this. The only other thing we're going to change is in the curvature here. Instead of convex, we're going to do concave. And let's take a look at the output of that. So with that, we are going to add a new noise. But we are also going to add a ambient occlusion node, and then we need our very useful ramp. So let's grab that here. Okay, we're gonna assign the noise to the brightness of the ambient occlusion, and then the output will go to our ramp. All right, let's look at our noise really quick. Once again, dragging it into our output. We're going to up the complexity. Let's start clamping this stuff. Okay, so let's take a look. And we're going to go ahead and invert these again and start crushing. Okay, so then we're just going to need to grab one more composite to put these together. So let's do that real quick. Blend color, and we're going to take the output of our curvature and put it in the base. All right, so in the interest of transparency, just had a little snag and my machine froze up. So jumping back in here, layout may look a little different. That's because I had to reopen everything. So we plugged in our curvature to our ramp for that ambient occlusion noise. We're adding the dirt layer. So we're going to need one more color layer here. So we're going to drag our paint, control drag. This new node is going to be our dirt. So let's open this up a little bit. We're going to name this our dirt. We're going to come back to base properties. We're going to take off all reflection since dirt does not reflect. Let me move this so we can see what's going on here. We are going to plug this dirt right into the output. Okay, so now we see we have no reflection. For the purpose of testing our new matte here, I'm going to give it some ridiculous non-dirt color. All right, so let's go ahead and before we plug this new composite into our blend, we're going to add one more ramp, actually, and it's right here. So we're going to do that. We're going to take our curvature and we're going to plug it into this input. Then this ramp output will go into the base color here. And now we're going to plug, all right, so just rearranging the stacking order there. So we've got our base color, we've got our paint, we've got our blend color 1, then we have our dirt, which is layer color 2, and then we're blending that. So let's check the output for that. All right, so we can start to see what's showing up here, but it's clearly not enough. So we want to go in here. That's what this ramp is for. Again, let's start crushing this guy. And now we can start to see more of our dirt coming through. So we're going to go ahead and just tweak this to get more of that dirt filling into these deep areas here, which is what we want. So, all right, let's exaggerate it even more. And okay, so now let's come back here and let's change our dirt color away from this hot pink. We will give it a nice deep color here to fill in. There we go. Now we have some grime. So that's looking better to me for dirt and filling that area up. And so if that is our hero material, let's shut this down. We're just going to duplicate it a couple times, actually. And first we'll get rid of some of these old testing materials that were in here. We're going to call this our outer shell. That was actually outside the record window. Sorry you didn't see that. All right, so let's edit copy, and we'll paste that. And we're going to call this one, this time I'll drag it in here. We'll call this one our chrome. Okay, we're going to go into our chrome shader graph here, and we're just going to change a couple things. So we still want all of our weathered look and dirt, grime, and all that. But instead of this this paint, we want to go back to more of an iron look. So we're going to change this. So there's our inner ring. Let's go ahead and throw this new texture on our inner ring. So we've definitely got more reflective stuff going on there. All right, so let's duplicate our chrome layer once more. We're going to copy that, and then we're going to paste it back down. Only this time we're going to call this, we'll just call it our dark metal. Straightforward and direct, right? Let's go into the shader graph here. We're going to change a couple more things. For our reflection color, let's deepen this. Okay, so we're going to get this deeper kind of metal here. And then that may not be dark enough yet, but we'll find out here in a minute. So we're going to grab our loop selection, and let's go in and grab some areas in here. I want this inner ring here to be this darker metal. We'll start in here, holding Shift. We're going to grab all of these faces here, and we're going to work our way out. We're going to keep going. All right, let's see what other areas we want. We just need this last ring here, I think. All right, so we're going to set that selection, and we're just going to call that dark metal like the material. All right, so we've got our selection tag there. We're just going to drag this dark metal right on top of everything, but it's only going to be on the selection area right there. So now we've got this darker metal on the inside ring here, which is looking nice. So let's see if there's anywhere else we want to assign that. I think I'm going to assign it to this lip here also. With that selection tag still highlighted here, let's go in and we're just going to highlight a couple more areas. So grabbing our loop selection, holding shift, we want this inner area here. And so again, making sure our selection tag is still highlighted, we're going to go ahead and say set selection again, and it'll update automatically. And there we go. We can see it over here. So let's back up a little bit. Let's go ahead and turn on our stage again. So that's what that is looking like, which is looking pretty cool. Okay, we are almost done. So let's come down the line here. We just got a couple more things to texture. For our gun canton here, I think I want to use that same dark metal. So I'm going to go ahead and throw that on there. Then we just have our little eyepiece here. So why don't we quickly grab another material, and we'll just call this our lens. Why not? Okay, so if we come into our shader here, we're back to our basic material. I'm going to go ahead and use a preset again. I'm going to use a tinted glass. So why don't we go ahead and put this on our eye. I'm going to move our eye up here, and we're going to throw our material on there. And there it is. And since it's so small, we're never going to get closer than that. There's not really too much more I want to do to that. So let's see here. Let's back up. I think the only other thing that I want to texture here is our little centerpiece here. And rather than him being like a hard plastic or metal, I think it'd be kind of cool if he was a light. So let's do that. We're gonna turn that into a light, and we're gonna add some volumetrics also. So let's turn off our stage, turn off our camera, and let's move on in here a little tighter. I'm actually on the symmetry side, so if I want to grab stuff, I need to flip us around here. Let's back up. There we go. All right, moving back in here. And let's grab our little ring here. That's really all we need. And using the mesh command, I'm going to go ahead and split that off. I'm going to delete it off the main sphere. And this is now going to be our light. Only other thing I'm going to do is I'm going to get rid of that selection tag on it. So with that gone, I actually need to move our light up to the top here. And so with that up there now, I'm going to go ahead and add a area light, because in Redshift area light is the only light that's going to allow us to assign a mesh as the light source. So under area here, we're going to go to mesh. Then we're going to grab our light mesh and drag it right in here. So let's back up. It has gone dark on us, but if we look under area here where it says visible, we can go ahead and click that on, and there we go. Our light is now active. So before we go too much farther though, we have to remember that because we pulled this light out of the symmetry here, it's actually not going to show up on this side. We're just going to have a hole in our object here. So we actually need to do a duplicate. So we're going to grab this guy. We are just going to flip him around 180 degrees. And there he is. He showed up again. So we're going to add a second light. And under this mesh, we're going to drag in our other side. And there it is. So now both sides will have a light going. Let's get back over here to our main side, and let's affect the color of our light, because I don't want it to be white like that. I would much rather have a nice blue light. Okay, and we're going to do that same thing. So last thing we need, it just looks like a blue dot right now, and that's not really looking much like a light. We can tell here that it is lighting our model a little bit, but it's just not enough to really show. So a couple things we're going to do. We're going to change the intensity. Multiply it by 2. We'll do the same thing to this guy. Multiply it. And then, so we can see it got a little brighter here. But the other cool thing with Redshift is we're going to add a Redshift Environment. That's going to allow us to have volumetrics with our lights here. So if we go under the area light, under volume, the contribution scale is how much of that volumetric do you want to contribute to the scene. So if we do a 1, that's actually probably way more than what we want. So I'm going to go to a 0.4, let's say. So let's do the same thing on this side, a 0.4 contribution scale, and just turn us to the side. You can see what's happening. See, and even that is probably too much. I think a 0.2 is going to be better. All right, let's turn our stage back on. Let's scroll down the timeline here. He opens up, and we can still see him illuminating the side there. So that is looking pretty cool and pretty done, I think. We've got all of our textures on. We've got our volumetric light showing. So yeah, I think we're actually going to conclude the series here, conclude this video. I really do hope that this 3-part series was helpful. I hope you learned some stuff. We started with the basic modeling of our character. We moved into Espresso and learned how to animate him with some sliders. And then we got in here, set up a camera, and even jumped into Redshift a little bit, which initially wasn't the plan. So again, I do hope that you enjoy the series. Leave me some comments below. Any ideas, suggestions, thoughts? Please click like, subscribe, all that good stuff. And we will see you in the next one. Take care.